everyone, I'm Kelly from Silly Moon Quilting Co. and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about getting a quilt kit, changing up that quilt kit and doing it more to your liking. We're going to talk about appliquing on top of ruler quilting or doing the ruler quilting afterwards. And we're going to talk about combining free motion and ruler quilting when you're working on a project. I hope you enjoy this one. Okay, so we're going to talk first about this snowman that I just did. This is how the kit comes. So it comes with everything you need. This was sent to me by Missouri Star. I am actually giving away one of these. If you're seeing this before November 17th, you want to head over to my Instagram channel and we'll talk about that there. But I want to talk about some of the choices I made when I quilted this. So the kit, when it came, it has enough of this background fabric for the front and the back. Now, I decided that I did not want to make this as a floor mat, which is what it is intended. It was a little bit large for me, but I decided to make it as a wall hanging instead. So what I did is the back then, I just used some batik fabric that was similar in colorway, not that it really mattered, because it's going to hang on a wall and you're not going to see the back. And then I actually saved all of this backing, the extra backing that they supplied in the kit, I saved to make something else later, perhaps some placemats or I'm not quite sure what yet. I'm not going to get into too much how I made this because this, on Missouri Star Quilt Co.'s YouTube channel, there's an entire video that Misty does on how to do this. But I am going to talk about some of the choices I made on my particular one. And one, of course, is the backing. Now, I want to also talk really quickly about thread. I used Wonderfil Deco Bob in the back so that you can barely see the stitches, which I like when I'm stitching. They blend quite nicely in the back. You can see a little bit of texture as we go along, but it really just blends nicely, and the color was a light gray, so you don't see too much of it. I made a couple different choices, though, when I used thread on the top half of the quilt. So the first thing I did, and I'll just go over this really quickly, is I did my background. And when I started this, I had a totally different idea. I was going to do snowflakes all over the background, and that was how this was going to be quilted. I changed my mind on that, and because of that, I didn't do this in the order that I probably would do other projects like this, and I'll talk about that a little bit as well. But if you look here, you can see what I did is I cut out my background, and then I hadn't quilted the background yet, and I appliqued on the head and the body of the snowman. And then I took our Gemini ruler and I did some clamshells, and I'll put a video in here of what that looks like. So once I had all the clamshells all quilted, then I went ahead and added the other applique items on top. And I just, it's used steam a seam, so I just attached it down using a hot iron. And then I got a sparkly, really kind of sparkly thread from Wonderfil. And I decided to use that in my nose here for turkey. I used our turkey ruler and created some nice little lines in here using turkey. But I used like a metallic thread, and I thought that was kind of fun. I'll just back up a bit too and let you know that I used a variegated thread in the clamshells, which I don't typically use, mainly because it doesn't photograph well. But I thought for this project, it added a little bit of dimension to it, and I was quite happy with it. So I did use metallic thread. Now, when I got to these little circle items here, which is part of the scarf, They are not cut perfectly round, and that's okay. It adds to it. So because of that, I thought we would add a little bit to the whimsy. So I actually chose not to use rulers. So I could have used Gemini and squirreled in until I got to using cheesy in the middle. But I thought it would be fun just to kind of free motion. And I just traveled from one to the other using a straight line across rather than take the time to break my thread at each one. Both are perfectly fine, and you can do either one, and one's not right and one's not wrong, but I just chose for this project to just do that along the edge. Now, you'll notice some of the edges, I did not stitch down the applique edges on these, and I'm not worried about that. This will not be washed very often. It's going to get hung on the wall, and then in the spring it'll get put away. It's a wall ornament. I will have to dust it mainly, or wipe it clean. It's a canvas type fabric, so it'll wipe clean. I don't need to worry about it going through the wash, so I'm not so worried about any of this kind of fraying or coming apart. I then went to the buttons, and I just used the same silver thread and added a little bit of fun little circles in there for the buttonholes, and then added the arms where I just did some little wishbones. And if you look closely here, you can see why I use rulers, because my free motion is not great. But that's okay. It was a fun project, and it is a very quick project. Now, when I got to this point, I decided that I was going to, so I had done all of this, and then when I got to the very end, I went, okay, I'm going to put in some snowflakes here, and I'm going to put a picture in here of what I actually stitched in here. So I wasn't happy with that snowflake. I didn't like the way it looked. It didn't really blend with the quilt. So I unpicked it. And yes, it was a lot of work, but that's okay. Sometimes that's the choice that we make. So I unpicked it, and I just went back and did a simple I used OG to do a background with the same thread that I used on here. And that's going to just kind of blend evenly in the background, and you can see on the back a little bit more texture. You can't really see it, but it does add texture when the light hits it a certain way. So, and then of course threw the binding on, and Bob's your uncle, we're done. The one thing I did want to mention too is for this project, I did not use actual batting. I used iron-on fleece, mainly because it's what I had, but I actually am pretty happy with it because of the drape that it's got now that I'm going to be hanging it on a wall. It's a little bit stiffer, and that's the fabric as well, but it's going to hang quite nicely on the wall, and yeah, I'm pretty excited about the way that turned out. Now, what I want to talk about now is just background, and when you're doing an applique thing, the different ways that you can do your background. So in this case, the problem with the way I did it is that every time I got to an end here, because I didn't want to stitch over top of these, I had to either break my thread and start back at the other side, or I had to travel along to my next row and then go back and forth. The advantage of doing this a different way, or the advantage of doing it that way, is that when you flip it over, if your background is, or your backing is not so neutral and kind of blends, or you have a thread that's darker, is what you see on the back will be what you see on the front. So in other words, these overall designs won't translate to the other side as well. So you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry that this is going to be stitched on all the way across and you're going to end up with more on the back than you really maybe want. That, of course, can be changed by the backing that you use. So on this one, like I said, had I to do this one over again, if I were to make another one, I would quilt all the background, then I would add the applique, and then I would do my stitching on the applique, and I would just make sure again that on the back I've got a thread that blends so you can see the texture, but I'm not seeing a whole bunch of different colors and different shapes. And again, this is going to go on a wall, so I'm not really going to see it anyway. I do want to bring in also this other quilt. I do want to bring in and just show you this other quilt, and some of you may have seen this before, but this is one where I did, like I had just said, I did the overall background first. So I did all of the twisty to create this texture, and then I appliqued and actually stitched on using a fancy stitch on my Bernina to stitch around these and keep them down. What that does on the back is you can now see I've got, it's probably really hard to see, but I've got my twisty design and then I've got the outline of that. But again, I made the choice to put on the back something that is kind of neutral, and I've used that light deco bob on the back so that it doesn't show up so much. It's not as obvious. So that's just a couple ways that you can kind of attack your applique projects. Really a personal preference, and it really depends on what you have on the back and what you have on the front and how you're going to stitch around that finished design. Any of the overall design rulers are great for doing your background because they just get it done fast, and then you can get on to the more fun things like the applique, and it just creates a super fun table runner or floor mat, or you could do the exact same concept if you were doing this as an actual quilt, and this would actually make a really cute quilt, and maybe I'll make it into a quilt. So I hope that that explains some of the differences that I did on this project, and I hope that you enjoy this. So I hope that you enjoyed that. That was a really fun project. I'd like to thank Missouri Star Quilt Company for sending me the project. If you are seeing this before the 17th of November, head on over to my Instagram channel if you're there, because we are actually giving away one of these kits. So I hope that you have the opportunity to do that. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below what you thought. I'd love to hear it. Have an amazing day.